Thanks for joining. JustProfessor here. You swear your friend said they'd meet you at 7. They insist they said 8. You're both completely confident. You both remember the conversation clearly, and you're both wrong, because neither of you actually remembers what was said. You remember what you think was said, and your brain filled in the rest with lies. This isn't about having a bad memory. This is about how memory actually works, and it's way worse than you think. Your brain doesn't record conversations like a video camera. It doesn't store exact words or precise details. Instead, it stores the general idea, the feeling, the main point. And then later, when you try to remember, your brain reconstructs the memory by filling in details that seem like they fit. Most of the time, those details are wrong. This is called gist memory, and it's the reason you can be 100% sure about something that never actually happened. So, what is gist memory? It's your brain's way of remembering the meaning of something without remembering the actual details. You remember the idea of a conversation, but not the exact words. You remember the feeling of an event, but not what actually occurred. Your brain prioritizes understanding over accuracy, which sounds smart until you realize it means most of your memories are basically made up. Here's how bad this really is. Researchers did an experiment where they showed people a list of words. The words were things like bed, rest, awake, tired, dream, snooze, blanket, pillow, all related to sleep, but the word sleep was never on the list. Later, when they asked people what words they saw, most people said they saw the word sleep. They were confident about it. They could picture it on the list. But it was never there. Their brain stored the gist, which was sleep-related words, and then filled in the missing word that fit the theme. This is happening to you constantly. You watch a movie and later you remember a scene that never happened. You read an article and remember a quote that was never written. You have a conversation and remember someone agreeing with you when they actually disagreed. Your brain takes the general idea of what happened and then invents details that make sense with that idea. And those invented details feel just as real as the actual memories. Let me give you a real-life example. You're in an argument with someone. You remember them saying something hurtful. You can hear their tone. You can picture their face. You're furious about it. But when you confront them, they have no idea what you're talking about. They swear they never said that. And here's the thing. They're probably right. You remember the feeling of being hurt. You remember the general tension of the conversation. And your brain filled in specific words that match that feeling. But those words might have never been spoken. This destroys relationships. Because both people remember different versions of the same event, and both versions feel completely real. You remember them promising something. They remember making no such promise. You remember them being rude. They remember being perfectly polite. Neither of you is lying. You're both just relying on gist memory, which is terrible at accuracy and amazing at confidence. Gist memory also explains why eyewitness testimony is so unreliable. Someone sees a crime happen. They remember a man in a red jacket running away. They testify in court. They're confident. But the actual security footage shows a man in an orange jacket. The witness stored the gist, which was a brightly colored jacket, and their brain filled in red because red is more common or more dramatic. They genuinely believed they saw red, but they didn't. This has put innocent people in prison, because juries trust confident eyewitnesses, not realizing that confidence has nothing to do with accuracy. Your brain will confidently tell you things that never happened, and you'll never know the difference. Here's where gist memory gets even more dangerous. False memories. Your brain doesn't just fill in small details. Sometimes it creates entire events that never occurred. Researchers have successfully implanted false childhood memories in people just by suggesting them repeatedly. They will say things like, "Remember that time you got lost in the mall when you were 5?" And after a few conversations, people start remembering it. They add details. They describe what the mall looked like. They remember how scared they felt. But it never happened. Their brain created the memory based on the suggestion because it seemed plausible. This happens naturally, too, without anyone planting ideas. You hear a family story told multiple times. Eventually, you remember being there, even if you weren't. You see photos of an event you didn't attend, and later you remember attending it. Your brain stores the gist of the story or the photo and then builds a memory around it. And that memory feels real. Think about your childhood memories. How many of them are actually your memories versus stories you've been told so many times that you think you remember them? That funny thing you did when you were 3. That vacation when you were 5. You probably don't actually remember those events. You remember the story of those events. And your brain turned the story into a memory. Just memory also affects how you learn. When you read a textbook or listen to a lecture, you don't remember the exact information. You remember the general idea. And when it comes time for a test, your brain fills in the details based on what seems right. Sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't. But either way, you're confident because gist memory doesn't come with a warning label that says, "This might be wrong." This is why studying feels like you know everything until you take the test. You read the material. You understand the main concepts. Your brain stores the gist. Then, on the test, when you need specific details, your brain tries to reconstruct them. And it gets them wrong. You could swear the answer was one thing, but it was actually another. Your gist memory failed you. Here's what makes gist memory especially tricky. The more time that passes, the worse it gets. Right after something happens, you might remember some details accurately. But a week later, a month later, a year later, all you have left is the gist. And the gist gets blurrier and blurrier while your confidence stays exactly the same. You'll argue about something that happened 5 years ago with complete certainty, even though your memory of it is basically fiction at this point. This also explains the Mandela effect. That's when large groups of people remember something incorrectly in the same way. Like people remembering that Nelson Mandela died in prison in the 80s, when he actually died in 2013. Or people remembering the Monopoly man having a monocle when he never did. These are examples of gist memory on a mass scale. People remember the general idea. Their brains fill in details that seem right. And because lots of people's brains fill in the same wrong details, everyone assumes the memory is correct. So, how do you deal with gist memory? How do you know what's real and what's made up? First, you need to accept that your memory is not reliable. This is hard because your memories feel so real. But feelings aren't evidence. Just because you're confident doesn't mean you're right. The sooner you accept that your brain lies to you, the less you'll trust your memories as absolute truth. Second, write things down. If something is important, don't rely on memory. Write it down immediately. Record conversations if you need to. Take notes, because the moment something happens, your brain starts converting it into gist, and the details start disappearing. If you want accuracy, you need an external record. Third, be humble in arguments. When you're fighting with someone about who said what, acknowledge that you might be wrong. Your memory isn't perfect. Neither is theirs. You're both working with gist memories that have been reconstructed and distorted over time. Instead of insisting you're right, try to figure out what actually happened using evidence, not just feelings. Fourth, don't trust old memories. The older the memory, the less accurate it is. If you're remembering something from years ago, assume most of the details are wrong. You might have the general idea right, but the specifics are almost certainly invented. Don't make important decisions based on memories that are that old unless you have external confirmation. And finally, be careful about constructing narratives. Your brain loves stories. It loves taking random events and turning them into a coherent narrative with a clear beginning, middle, and end. But life isn't that neat. When you find yourself telling a story about your past that fits together perfectly and explains everything, be suspicious. That's probably gist memory doing its thing, smoothing out the messy reality and replacing it with a cleaner, more satisfying version. Look, gist memory is one of those things that makes you question everything. Because if your brain is constantly making stuff up and passing it off as real, how do you know what actually happened? How do you trust your own experiences? And the honest answer is, you can't. Not completely. But here's the thing. Gist memory exists for a reason. Your brain can't store every detail of everything that happens. It would be overwhelmed. So it stores the important stuff, the meaning, the feeling, and it lets go of the rest. That's efficient. That's practical. The problem is that when you need those details later, your brain pretends it has them when it really doesn't. The solution isn't to fix your memory. You can't. The solution is to stop treating memory like it's a reliable source of truth. Your memory is more like a creative writing exercise based on real events. Sometimes it's accurate. Sometimes it's completely made up. And most of the time, it's somewhere in between. So next time you're absolutely certain you remember something, ask yourself if you actually remember it or if you just remember the idea of it. Because there's a huge difference, and your brain isn't going to tell you which one it is. If this made you question every memory you've ever had, hit subscribe.